Hi, my name is Shadi Atia, professor at Liège University in Belgium, and today's presentation is about structured scientific writing. Well, the presentation is a part of a playlist on scientific publishing. I hope you watch previous videos on this topic. Well, the audience of today's presentation is mainly early career researchers who are preparing a research thesis or dissertation or journal article publication, and the overarching aim of today's presentation is to help you make your manuscript well organized, clear and readable for a submission. Now I'm going to talk about the first point is that are you ready to write your paper or your manuscript or your thesis or dissertation? What is the IMReD structure? Number 3, the setting, how to set your manuscript structure. Number 4, the different sections of your manuscript. Number 5, the paragraph structures that you should adopt. Number 6, how to revise and edit your first draft. Number 7, how to write the draft, and finally some takeaway messages. So let's start with the first point of the introduction. Well, writing a scientific text is not only an art, it's a balance between art and between technicality, and you need to be aware about it. It's just not technical point and it's not just art, it is a balance between both, and you need to have a feeling and experience with language so that you can articulate and that you can express yourself. And language can limit or enhance what you are writing, and if you are writing in a foreign language, it will be very important that you make extra effort to make sure that the language you are writing in, especially in this case English, will be understood by the audience. So structured writing limits the confusion and provides clear communication, and the title and internal headings also of your work will create an easier way to access your work. So it's very important to pay attention to the titles and internal headings. Now, according to George Gopin and Judith Swan from the Science of Scientific Writing, they are saying that the fundamental purpose of scientific discourse is not the mere presentation of information. It's just not we are throwing a wall of information, here's the result, just get it. Actually, it's thoughts, but rather it's actual communication. So the most important point of a journal article is your communication style, the message you are conveying. So it does not matter how pleased an author might be to have converted all the right data into sentences and paragraph. What matters mainly is it matters only whether a large majority of the reading audience accurately perceive what the author had in mind. So you are not writing for yourself, you are writing for the audience that will perceive the work. And if you are not formatting the work and stylizing your work in a certain way, the audience, they will not understand. So it's very important to be humble and to make this extra effort and to see the perspective from the reader point of view and make sure that your document is well complying with readers' expectations and reader ability to understand. So let's start with the first point, are you ready to write? And this is a very important point. Well, first of all, in order to ask yourself if you are ready to point, you need to make sure that your topic or your research is novel and that you are providing new knowledge or new insight, and this novelty aspect is present. Second point is that your work is complete. You must have done your all experimental work or modeling or observational analysis or qualitative research, and your paper now has data. You have a sufficient analysis and you have sufficient substance to claim certain findings. Also, what is very important to make sure that your document, especially if it's a conference paper or a journal paper, it is fitting and aligning with the conference scope or with the journal scope and the audience that is part of that journal, for example. So these are the 3 main criteria to start before writing. Another important point that is very important and many researchers are not aware about when they start writing is the least publishable unit. You need to make sure that you have basic ingredients that will constitute what the journal will consider a publishable article. In many cases, some young or early career scientists who are writing for the first time, they have too little content or they have too much content. So it's very important to make sure that you have a certain dose, quantity of findings, and that you check with your seniors, with your supervisor, with your team, if this content is good results to be represented in a conference paper or in a journal paper. Do I need to do extra work? Is it already too much work? I need to chop it. So it's very important to distinguish this different content that you have and make sure that you have least publishable unit. So you have at least a little number of figures and tables and a certain text in the form of paragraphs that are conveying certain findings or insights and that you want to share with people. And this makes a paper, depending on the journal, from 3,000 words up to 12,000 words, depending on the journal. So this is very important. And this brings us now to the word budgeting. In general, I advise that you use the wording strategically and to match the structure with this proposed structure based on this publication. Well, I advise you first of all to do is to check the journal where you want to publish and check the word limits. Let's say you have a word limit of 8,000 words. What you have to do is then you divide your paper into introduction, literature review, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, and based on these percentages, you relate them to your 8,000 words. So from the 8,000 words, 8 to 10% of them will be going for the introduction, 30% of the words will be going for the literature review, 15 to 20% will go to the methodology, 20% will go to the results, 20 to 21% or even 25% will go to the discussion, and 5% will go to the conclusion. By that, if you have a budget, whether it is 8,000 or 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever figure you have, you start to provide an estimation of the words that will be associated with every section in your manuscript. And by that, you avoid overloading your methods and your results at the expense of the literature review and the discussion. Because sometimes when early career researchers start to write their first paper, they have unproportional word budgets. They have a section that is huge and another section that is very thin. In this sense, it's important to use this diagram. You can see that high impact articles that are accepted, they are going in this red diagram. This is corresponding to the figures that I cited here. And rejected papers, they have a different common diagram where you can find that the literature review and the methodology and the result, they're kind of equally treated in the range of words used for the text. So this is a very useful kind of guideline in order to create a budget before writing, and then that you know, okay, I have a maximum limit of words, and for every section, what are the expected words that I need to provide. Now let's move to point number 2, which is the IMReD structure. I hope you heard it before, but the IMReD structure is a very classical way of writing. You should not forget that scientific writing is a very classical way of writing. It's a very specific way of writing, and we have a very conservative way of writing. It is not up to you now to change it. This is we experienced this since years, and we developed it to have always an introduction with the why, the problem, gap, and aims. The methodology is about the how, the data, the tools, and the process. The result is about the what, the findings with the visuals, and the discussion is so what. So this is the interpretation, the implication, and the critique. So if you follow those 4 classical questions, you will figure out that most of the cases we will write a paper like that. We have an introduction section, a literature review section, a method section, and a result section, and a discussion. And I hope you do not skip any of those. Don't merge the discussion with the results. Don't merge the discussion with the conclusion. Don't merge the literature review with the introduction. If you go back to this advice here on the word budgeting, you see that highly published paper, highly cited paper, and high impact articles are those articles that are distinguishing those 6 substructures and giving each of them their required terms and words to make sure that the work is appropriately balanced, and when somebody is going to read it, they will understand it. If they want to know about the state of the art, where they will go. If they want to know about the methodology, where they will want to go. So don't invent the wheel. This is not a point of invention. This is a point of compliance. Do your best to comply with this structure. Now, what is the best way if you have a conflict between what I'm saying and reality? In this sense, the best reference is to go to the journal author guidelines, and here you will find that every scientific journal and every academic institution provide an author guide, so that they indicate their expectation on the structural requirement for the journal. In this sense, comply with the journal's requirement. Let's move to now point number 3, which is how to set up your manuscript structure. Well, first of all, I always advise to plan what you are going to write in the following order. First of all, start with writing your methodology section. This is the most logical way because the methodology is the recipe of your work. After you wrote the methodology, you start to write your results and make sure that the results correspond to the methodology. For sure, you need to have in the background the research questions, but start with the methodology, then followed by the results. Make sure your findings are well articulated in the results or in the discussion. Highlights of your study must be then written after. The discussion then should be developed, and in the discussion you must talk about the findings and the strengths and weaknesses of your work, the implications of your work and the future work, and then you can finally start working on the literature review and then the conclusion. And the last thing you should be writing is the introduction, because the introduction is like a trailer. If you have a thumbnail or if you have a trailer for a video, you cannot do it before that you have already the whole video done. Same story happens here with scientific articles. Finish the whole paper from the methodology to the conclusion, and when you are done you can write the introduction, so that you make it timely, that you make it connected, that you make it exciting, that you make it based on reality, what is there in the text, and from there you can move on and submit the paper. Now let me give you here an example. This is a paper that we written with one of my research collaborators, Dr. Semahi, and it was written in 2019. As you can see, how did we start? First thing we did, we worked first on the methodology. So this is the methodology section, and I asked Dr. Semahi to come up with a study conceptual framework, the most important figures and tables that are part of the methodology. Here I'm not talking about results, but we are talking about the means. We are talking about our case study, we are talking about the context, the tables, and he simply just created a substructure for the methodology and he added the figures and tables, and that's it. And then we had a round of review and discussion and then started moving on. Same story with the results. Before even writing any text, we listed the results that we want to show and we aligned it. We gave every figure a number, a caption, and we made sure that the methodology is clear regarding the artifacts, whether they are tables or figures or illustrations, and we have the results. Once we are done with the methodology, once we are done with the results, we move then to writing. So we don't start writing before having first our artifacts or our outcomes generated in the methodology section and in the results section. Then we move to the section structure. Well, every section structure need to have a substructure, so every section must have its own breakdown, and the breaking down of a section should be based on different paragraphs, which allows to flow or have a flow of idea in a logical way. So you have to start with an idea to an idea to an idea, and you cannot discuss something here that is complicated, that is A, B, before having first discussing A and then B. So this is the logic of your section structures. Normally any paragraphs will have this structure of an introduction, then we have a series of paragraphs, and then we have a conclusion. So let's say we are talking about the methodology. You need to have an introduction for your methodology, followed by the subsections of your methodology and the paragraphs that are aligned with these subsections, and finally you have a conclusion of your methodology. Now the section structure requires always to have an introduction to explain what are you going to tell. Always say what's coming up when you start the let's say the state of the art section or the methodology section or the results section or the discussion. Start first with an introduction. Tell me what are you going to explain in this section. Give me a brief outline about the topic that we are going to explore together, you as a writer and me as a reader in this section. Then you will have the body paragraphs. Those are a series of paragraphs that are explaining the content, and they will include the main points and the main contribution and the main themes and arguments and justifications that you want to share with the reader, and then you must conclude. So section methodology, for example, must start with an introduction, a series of paragraphs, and a conclusion, because the conclusion must remind us, it must sum up and highlight the most important that was told. I always use in my writing mind maps, and if you are writing as a scientist, or even if you are writing in literature in general, you will find that the most usable technique and tool is the mind map. You must use a mind map to structure and break down the content of every section of your work. So let's say we are talking about the discussion, or we are talking about the results. Create first a mind map, and in the mind map you create and check what will be the storytelling, and you will create the paragraphs and the bullets and the illustrations or the artifacts that you have in order to bring them together. You can even chop it and put it on a board and start to see, okay, here I will put this result, then I will comment on it, then I will push this idea, then I will push this finding, and then I will link it together. So when you create first the mind map before writing, when you are asked then to write, the writing task will be very, very easy. So this is an example, one of my papers. We first created our mind map. We said, okay, we will put this table and then this figure. Here we will talk about the topic X. Then we will follow with another figure and another table. We talk about topic Y. And then we will go in topic 3. We will do a comparison, and we'll have another table, and then we will do the conclusion. So first we started with the mind map, creating our different links of the topics and the themes we want to discuss. And then we translated the mind map in the manuscript, just roughly through the figures and some bullets and subtitles, without writing. All that we still didn't write the process. We're just creating a substructure, a very detailed breakdown structure for the content of our section. And here then you can see an example of what I'm talking about, that every manuscript must have a plan, and this micromanagement of the content and creating the mind map. When you say paragraph 1, I'm going to talk about this topic and what are the key bullets under this paragraph. Then you say paragraph 2, I'm going to talk about this topic number 2, and here are the 3 bullets related to that. And then I have paragraph 3 and the 3 bullets, and then I have paragraph 4, which is maybe more analytical, more critical, more comparative, and then I will have my conclusion. So this is the best way to have a structured way of writing. And I always remind you to use the Matryoshka doll, because the Matryoshka doll, it helps you to kind of structure your ideas and also rank your ideas and prioritize. Sometimes we have a minor information, we want to put it at the beginning, while when we look at the Matryoshka, you have to see what is the primary, what is the secondary, what is the tertiary or the third range of importance of the data, and then you can start to say, this is important, this is related to this, this will be later, this will be with this group. And based on that, you can start to arrange your text, you can organize your points, you can group the points together, what is the highest important, and always we start with the most important to the least important, and we can use a very simple logic, and we can distinguish arguments from details. So don't start with a detail saying, I found that the temperature is this and this. This could be a detail with the argument behind it maybe is more important, that there is a trend of increasing temperature, for example. So always make sure that you have a primary logic in your storytelling backed by some arguments, and then the arguments are backed by facts. Facts are the least and the last in your paragraph writing. Before them comes the arguments, and before them come the idea or the conclusion or the main concept. So it's very important to think like that. Now let's move to the paragraph structures and what are the different structures. First of all, writing a paragraph is an art. Now, after doing this structure and that you have already all the data points and all the arguments and all the main concept and ideas well placed, and you have the figures well placed, you have the tables, all the artifacts well placed, now it's time, and you have the bullet points already, now it's time to translate all that into smooth, well-written paragraphs. And as I say, it is an art writing. Writing paragraphs is an art. We have different ways of writing paragraphs. I want to start with the sexy method, which is a method that first you start with a statement, and this is the main point of the paragraph. What is the point you are going to discuss in the whole paragraph? So you start with the main point. Then you go for the explanation of this point, and you say, what is the meaning of this, let's say, statement? You tell to the reader what is behind it, what makes it true, and then you give examples, and you give a quote, you give a data, you give a fact, you give some concrete evidence, you put a number. By that, you show the level of granularity, you go to detail, and then finally back, you give importance. You say why this point is important, why it is relevant to the reader, why it matters. So if you remember the Matryoshka, it's the same story. I start with the idea, okay? I have the idea. Then I follow the idea with an explanation. And then I follow the explanation with some data points. And then I go to the importance by concluding. So it's always going like that. So this is the example of the sexy way of writing paragraphs. There is another technique, it's called the peel. So here also you are free to choose. You say, okay, you start with a point. The writer should offer a clear, concise, and relevant point or argument. So here you start with an argument. Then again, you provide an explanation or evidence to that argument by interpreting the point supported by evidence. The writer should reflect or collect credible and up-to-date sources. So here you can enrich the text with references or with your own findings. Make sure that you have something recent. And then you give example. Again, the example could be your own work or from outside. It depends if you are in the discussion, it could be outside. If you are in the results, it should be your own work. And then you support your thesis statement with these vivid examples. And finally, you end up with the L, which is the linking. Here you relate the discussed point to the following opening sentence and in the upcoming paragraph as well as the research question. So this is also a very interesting or a very well working way to develop your paragraphs in this logic and align your findings, your data points, your arguments, your examples, your concept, your idea in this order. So this is an example of one of the papers that we wrote. It's the same paper I showed you earlier. I invite you to read it and you will figure out that our way of writing the discussion, this is how we wrote the discussion before filling up the paragraphs. We first started to have a logic following the sexy approach, and we started to put the points, and together with my co-authors we made sure that we have also always these bullets of the logic, and we say, okay, this will be the introduction, or this will be the idea, this will be the explanation, this will be the example or the fact point, this will be the importance, is it here? And then we write short sentence, short sentence, short sentence, and then once we have it approved among us as co-authors, we start to say, okay, now let's start execute and let's start write the full paragraph. Now moving to the point number 6, we are almost reaching the end. How to revise and edit? Well, you need to understand that part of writing any manuscript is that you have to iterate. It's an iterative process. You need to close and finish and go back, restart, meaning that you need to revise your work. Revising and editing your work is very important. You need to ask yourself, does your story make sense? Did you include the most important content in relation to the word limit? Do you respect the word limit and do you convey the key message that your findings are conveying? Seek peer review at this stage. You can start to ask other colleagues or peers or supervisor or lab collaborators to read and check your work and your paragraphs. You can even do it not only when the paper is fully finished, you can do it only when you have the bullets. For example, you can ask them if they understand the writing based on your sexy approach of writing and developing your paragraphs. You can also plan a workshop with your team and ask your colleagues to just read the structure or the skeleton of your work, or even the draft, and invite the colleagues, invite the supervisor, and make them go through the document together to make sure that you have a well-structured writing style. Some other tips I can share with you is that keep your paper title always short. Maximum 96 letters with spaces, that's my advice for any title. Keep your sentences also short, never exceed 12 words, maximum 120 letters with spaces. If you start to write longer sentences, this means that you are influenced by your mother tongue or influenced with, you are not writing well in English. And this means that you need to take courses about how to write academic English, making sure that you have short sentences that are following up to come to the point more shortly and less descriptively, and that you have more analytical, critical content. Keep your paragraphs also short, 250 words, 200 words are more than enough, exceptionally 300 words. And for sure, respect the word budget that we talked about from the beginning, so that you make sure that there is a full coherence and balance between the different sections of your article. Also, give special attention to the internal headings. If you have a heading of the methodology and then after you are talking about the boundary conditions or the validation, make sure that you have proper titles and use proper semantic. Use good headings because they will make the work catchy, short, make them short and clear. Proofread your headings with care. You can only take time and eye just for the headings, and from there you make sure that you have a good substructure that helps the reader to understand that these are additional steps 1, 2, 3, 4 as part of the breakdown of the section that you are working on or writing. Now you are ready to write your draft number 1. Your draft 1 is ready. Keep it simple, take your time to write, because now you created a very good structure. So writing will be like relatively easy. You just need to connect the dots and transform your bullets into paragraphs. Set a writing ritual that you write at least every day 3 to 4 hours, concentrated, focused, and that you finish first, like we said, the order, methodology, results, and so on. Be factual, bring the quantification, bring numbers in your writing, make sure that you cite your own work, cite others' work, bring facts, do comparisons. Use passive form like the research is introduced. Don't say we, don't say I, always write in a passive form. And as much as possible, go to the point and avoid blah, blah, blah. Try to be analytical, try to compare, try to be critical and not just descriptive, because if it's just description, then you are losing a lot of space, and intellectually the quality of the work will be very low. So these are all advices when you are starting to write your draft. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. Some takeaway messages before I leave you. Well, structured scientific writing is not easy, but it requires skill and requires experience. And if you have a specific, very clear approach, you will succeed and you will have very interesting results. Manuscripts require plans, and this means that manuscript plans instantly give a structure, because once you have a plan, the structure will be there and then it will be easier to fill up the structure. They prevent you from forgetting to include any important points, and they prevent you from losing your way as you write. Because when you have a plan, you have a budget, you have a substructure, you distinguish facts from arguments, from ideas, from examples, and by that you can easier design your paper and make it easier also for the reader to follow it up. Number 2, start writing by creating short sentences in bullet formats. This is essential. Don't think that we start writing just from the beginning to the end the paper. I just start writing the introduction and I keep typing and then I reach the conclusion. It never works like that. We start strategically. We start by writing bullets, designing the structure and the breakdown structure, and we do mind maps for every section. We start always with the methodology, we start always after with the results, then the discussion, then the conclusion, then we move up to the state of the art, and the last thing we write is the introduction and the abstract. And for sure, design your paragraphs well and take the time and check your storytelling so that you make sure that your work is consistent, coherent, and don't forget, you are writing for others, not for yourself. So you need to be humble, you need to be modest, and you need to reach out to the other to make sure that they are understanding your work. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. It's part of a playlist on scientific publishing. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you have any comment or any question or disagreement, don't hesitate to comment down in the comment section. I'm always looking at them, and I'm looking forward for next presentation in this playlist. Today's presentation was about structured scientific writing. Good luck with your paper writing, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you very much.